Okay, so welcome back to another synth guide on this channel, and on this occasion we need to talk about the Minilogue XD from KORG. So this is a monster synth. Don't be fooled. With 4 voice polyphony and a lack of LFOs, it can still create an incredible amount of sounds. Now there is a reason why this one is one of the best selling synths in the world. So this video is not a review, it's going to be a complete in-depth guide about everything that we can do with this synth. We're going to talk about the obvious parts, like the oscillators, the filters and everything else, but this has a lot of hidden sections and a lot of, tiny little things that you can do. And we're gonna talk about all of that. So again, it's a complete in-depth guide, and I'm going to be dividing the guide on 2 different parts. This is going to be like the part 1, where we're going to be learning pretty much the whole synth without the sequencer. Everything that we can do with the sequencer and the motion sequence and everything else, I'm going to be covering that on the second video, because again, if not, it's going to be super extensive. So you can go to the timeline or maybe go to the description, and you're going to find all the different sections right there. So maybe you just want to jump sections because maybe you already know about the oscillators and you don't want to see this. So maybe you can skip it if you wanted to. All right, so before we start covering every single thing, we're going to start with the oscillators. Of course, like the first thing that generates the sound. I'm going to be going to the edit mode and change something on the configuration. I'm going to go to edit mode, and right here you have 3 options. We're going to talk about that. We need to go to global edit. And right here in global edit, you have this option, which is going to be the step number 8. And notice that at the top you have 4 lines. That's going to be 4, then 4, then 4, then 4. So you have 16. So when I say I go to the step number 8, it's going to be this one. So if we go right there, we're going to start getting some options. And if you keep clicking or tapping or whatever you want to call it, you're going to be kind of shifting or swapping or going through the different configuration options. So one of them is going to be the parameter and then display. Now by default, you get it to normal. I'm going to be changing it to all. And this is because right now, whenever we do something, and let me just go out, whenever we do something, we will have a better information right now, which is, not enabled by default. And let me give you an example. If I go to the delay, I'm right now in the delay section. Now let's say I'm just gonna go over there, just turn it on. Sometimes you don't get information of how much you're doing or what you're doing. Now, when you enable that, it's gonna tell you how much depth you're doing, how many, what the subdivisions are, or what is the tempo that you're doing, and everything else. Same if I go to the cutoff, it's gonna tell me you're doing cutoff and you're doing that much. That's why, I believe that option is going to be very useful for us on this video. And okay, so let's just begin. So before we start with the usual, which is going to be the oscillators, I want to cover first how you can navigate the different patches and how to do an initial patch and how to load the panel and everything else. Because let's be honest, every time that when we buy a synthesizer, we're going to go through the patches, and this thing has a lot of patches. You can go through a lot of different sounds, which is something that we are not going to do right now. But again, you can go right there and just toggle the different patches with the encoder. Now, sometimes, since you have a lot, it's going to be kind of a pain in the where to navigate them. Let's say that you want to go, a little bit faster. So you're going to need to, or maybe go to the 200. So you need to go and scroll, do a lot of scroll just to get to the 200s. Well, you don't need to. You can do shift right here. Let's say I go to number 1. And when you do shift and you scroll, you're going to be going by tens. Notice that it's going up by tens and not by 1. And you can easily get to the 200 by just doing that. Right? So, that's the first thing. So let's say that I want to start with the clean patch, right? I just don't want to use that sound. I just want to start clean. So you could have 2 ways of doing this. If you go all the other way, you're going to be going to the side where you don't have anything. So init program, it means that you are on an init program. So you have nothing loaded, and it's going to sound clean. But maybe you just don't want to do this, and maybe you want to restart a patch, right? So what you can do, you can go to the edit mode, and on the program edit, well, you have these 3 options right here. If you go right there, you're going to be able to rename it. And if you go right there, it says initialize and execute. So if you do yes, and you press right, then this one is going to be initialized. And of course, this one is going to be the 0 number 2. Now, if I go out and I go back in, notice that the changes were not saved. And it's because when you start an initial patch, everything is going to be working in memory. You're not really saving anything. You just work in memory. And if you change the patch, it's going to delete everything that you did. So that's why you need to make sure when you start a new patch and you start, kind of doing your magic, if you didn't save it, you're going to lose it. So make sure you save it on a secure place. And much later, we're going to talk about how to save because it's very simple. So sometimes what you would like to do, and in this case, I'm just going to go to a random init patch. It's going to be the 479. So we get nothing. So right now, again, remember the init patch, it means that you're loading a default patch that is going to be in memory. So it doesn't reflect all the knobs that you have right here. So, you have some other options. You want the patch to adjust to whatever position you have on the knobs right there. So if you go shift and you press and hold shift, it's going to give you some options. For example, the right is going to be the load panel. Then the other one is going to be, or the rack is going to be the tuning. Now the one we care right now is going to be the right. If I do right, it's going to do load panel. So this means that now, once you tap that, it's going to recognize all the positions that you have right here, and it will apply it to the current patch. So now, if I play something, notice that it sounds much different. And it's because I have a delay on, I have some other knobs just, moved to different places. So it's just taking everything into account, and now that is going to be the patch that you're using, right? Okay, so let's talk about the oscillators. I'm going to go up on the mixer right here and all the way down and all the way down, and the cutoff is all the way up. So if I play something, we're going to be getting that. So you have three main waveforms, and oscillator number 1 and oscillator number 2 are just the same, and we're going to be covering all the basics right now. And in this case, the oscillator number 1 can do a saw, can do a triangle right there, and it can do, of course, a square. Very simple. And in terms of ranges, you can go from to 2, you can go to 4, you can go to 8, or you can go to 16. Now I'm going to go and keep maybe on there, right there. So we are going to be on 8, and I'm going to be doing a square. So we are getting a square. Now then, right on each oscillator, of course, you can control the pitch with this control. If you go right here, you go up, you're going to see that it's going to go up in pitch, or it's going to go down in pitch. Very simple controls. Right now, we're just covering the basics. All right, so one thing that you maybe didn't know, if you go up in pitch, notice that it's doing it by cents. So you're kind of you're going very slowly up in pitch. But it's doing it by in cents. What happens if you want to do it by semitones, which is something, that might be useful. So what you can do, you can go to shift right here. And when you hold shift and you move the control, it's going to go by 100, which is going to be, 1 semitones, 2 semitones. Right now, if I go all the way up, we are going to be on the 12 semitones up. This is how far you can go. It's 12 semitones up. That's a very useful function. So notice on oscillator number 1 and 2, for now, they are going to be the same, and you have a shape control. So usually on most synthesizer, especially on vintage ones, you can do pulse width modulation. This is a very classic thing that you get. Now you can only do pulse width modulation or pulse width with a square. You cannot do it with anything else. So nowadays with digital, we can do whatever we want, but this is analog. So if I play something, notice that we get a square. So by moving this shape, you're going to be, of course, making the square narrow, or you're just going to be making it wider. So you can do pulse width modulation with manually in this case. Of course, we can modulate this one later. Right now, we are just the width of the pulse manually. And again, very simple, very classic thing. So I'm going to go to a saw right now. So of course, we cannot do pulse width modulation with a saw or a triangle. So we cannot do anything. So with most synthesizers, you get the pulse width modulation control. You can use it with a square, but when you go to other things, you cannot do anything. This control becomes unusable. Now on this synthesizer, there's something else right here. So on the saw and triangle, what you can do wave folding. So if I do our just saw, the common saw, and I start moving this control, notice how the waveform is going to start to change. And yeah, we are doing wave folding. Same thing if you go to the triangle. This one is going to be a little bit more obvious. If I go right there and I start going up in shape, it's just going to alter the shape. It's going to wavefold it, which is something super cool. And again, this is something that you don't get with all synthesizers. With most of synthesizers, you just get pulse width modulation, right? So this, just like this feature, the wavefolding on the other waveforms, the synth is filled. It's just filled with tiny little things that can radically change the sound. Alright, so now we need to talk about sync, ring, and cross modulation. So far, notice that the first oscillator and the second oscillator, the first VCO and the second VCO, are completely the same. They can do the same things, but now things are going to be changing. Now, on the oscillator number 1, you get the option of sync and ring, and the second one has the cross modulation depth. So now they're going to be different because now the number 1 is going to be the master pretty much, and now the number 2 is going to be the slave. So the first thing we need to talk about is going to be oscillator sync. So if this is down, it means that it's off, and if it's up, it means that it's on. So if I go right here and turn the oscillator number 2 all the way down and I play something, we get that sound, and if I turn it off, we get the same sound. And it's because on this case, the oscillator number 1 is the master, and the master doesn't change when you use oscillator sync. The one that's going to be doing the change is going to be the slave. And in the case of this synthesizer, the oscillator number 2 is going to be the slave. It's going to be restarted every time that the oscillator number 1, the master one, it says so. That's how oscillator sync works. And of course, I'm explaining this with lame terms. And what's going to be happening is that now this is not entirely in control of its pitch. The phase is going to restart following this cycle of the number 1. So if I go to on, now we are doing oscillator sync, you're not going to hear the difference. The change happens on the oscillator number 2. So I'm going to go all the way up on the oscillator number 2. So now this one is in sync, right? It's following the master oscillator. So if I play something, we don't get a lot of change because we are not doing anything with the other controls. When you start kind of offsetting this oscillator and doing something else, you're going to start getting a difference in sound. If I turn it off, notice it sounds different. If I turn it on, notice it starts sounding a little bit different. So in this case, I'm going to go to a square for now. And again, it's going to start sounding different. Now, the magic happens with oscillator sync when you start modulating whatever the oscillator number 2 can do. Now, if I turn off the sync, in the case of oscillator number 2, we can go up in pitch and we can go down in pitch. We know how this works. Now, when you're syncing, remember, this one is going to be restarted to follow the master one. So now going up in pitch will not change the pitch. It will just give us that. It will give us that oscillator sync kind of a sound, which is super cool. And if I play something, right? So again, that's the classic oscillator sync sound. And if you bring both oscillators, everything is just going to get just bigger, of course. Right. So the magic happens when you start modulating the controls. We are going to be talking about this later when we reach this section, which is the modulation section. But that's how oscillator sync works. If you're not getting anything, maybe it's because you're not using the oscillator number 2, maybe it's all the way down, or maybe you're just playing exactly the same thing and you're not modulating anything of this. That's, how it works and how you can get a cool sound of oscillator sync. Now, then you have the ring modulation option. And if you want a more technical explanation on how this works, you can go to the web. You can find a million places where they can explain how ring modulation works. But this one works pretty much the same way than sync. Now, it's a little bit different, of course, but the VCO will be the one to doing the ring modulation to the number 2. Now, of course, it's a little bit different from sync. If I go and turn it on, it works the same way. All the way up is going to be on. Notice that if I play something on the oscillator number 2, the pitch will still kind of change. Now, in the case I'm going to go right now to a saw, and we are on the same place on oscillator number 2 and oscillator number 1. Notice that we get some kind of a sound. It's a different sound. So that's gonna be, you know, the ring sound. If I go all the way down, we just get a normal saw. Now, just like sync, you're gonna start getting different timbres when you start, of course, offsetting the pitch, but this will change the pitch of oscillator number 2, or when you start changing the waveforms and just, you know, offsetting the both oscillators. Right, so that's when the sync with the ring magic happens. I'm gonna go back again to both, you know, on the same spot, and the next thing that you get is going to be cross mod. Now, cross mod, it works pretty much the same. You know, we are still talking about a master oscillator doing something to the other oscillator. Now, in the case of cross modulation, this one kind of revolves around the same idea. The pitch of the VCO1, this one, will modulate the frequency of the VCO2. So again, we are talking about the same thing. This one is just kind of changing the behavior of the second one, but everything works in a different way. Now, in the case of ring mod, it's going to be a little bit more aggressive. So right now, I'm going to be playing the VCO number 2. That's the only one I'm doing. And right now, if we don't do anything, we just get, you know, a normal saw. But the cross mod, remember what it's going to do. It's going to be the VCO1, the frequency of this one will modulate this one. So if we go up on the cross mod, we're going to be doing more cross modulation. And notice that it's going to be starting. It's going to start to move. And at some point, of course, it's going to go crazy. And that's how, you know, cross mode works. Now, of course, you need to find the sweet spot. And this is, again, going to give you different timbres. Maybe right there. And right now, if I'm holding a key, it sounds crazy. But if you start playing something, you're going to start getting... You're going to start getting different sounds. Of course, right now, I'm all the way up on the oscillator number 2. If I go to the number 1, you're going to start getting a blend of both, of course. If I go all the way down, that's my square. If I go up, right here we get the cross modulation. So if I go to the other one, we're going to be using the square. So again, we are doing the same thing. We are kind of offsetting both oscillators. So we're going to get a different timbre, of course. So let me just find the sweet spot. I kind of like that. Right, so of course, without reverb, everything sound or effects, everything sounds kind of weird. I'm just kind of playing whatever, but yeah, that's gonna be the cross modulation. So of course, if I go all the way down, or maybe just put it right there, the effect is gonna be, of course, you're gonna get less of an effect. Now, the cool thing is that you can still use your shape, you can still go up on cross modulation, you can still do sync, and you can still do ring, so you can still kind of make a combination of all of this. And of course, the sound is going to be changing just a little bit. So again, notice all the possibilities that you get with this synthesizer, and we just covered this section. Right, just with the shape, the cross modulation, the sync, and the ring, you can get a million sounds. And imagine what you can do when we get to the multi-engine, which is the phase modulation section. Right, so now we're going to talk about the VCF. Of course, the mixer is very simple. You can go up and down in volume for all the 3 different oscillators. Now, maybe you're thinking, why not? You're not going to the multi-engine. So the multi-engine, this one, the VPM, is the most complicated part on this synthesizer. And I'm going to need to provide a really good explanation and it's going to be a little bit extensive because I want you to understand how it works behind the scenes and all the things that you get on the multi-engine. So I'm gonna for now skip it. I'm gonna keep on going with the rest of the synthesizer because you can still get a lot of different sounds and really cool sounds without the multi-engine. The multi-engine will just expand what the synth can do in in an exponential way. So, okay, so now we're gonna move on to the filter. Now, of course, I'm gonna be doing a saw. I'm gonna be doing nothing right here. So we're just going up in volume, right? Okay, so so what we can do with the filter? So you get the cutoff, and with the cutoff, you can cut high frequencies. That's pretty much what we do with the cutoff. Pretty simple, right? So it's a 2-pole filter, right? So then you get your resonance control, and the resonance is going to be a peak on the breakpoint of the filter. So if you're cutting frequencies like that, and you go up in resonance, notice that you have a peak right there at the breakpoint. And of course, you get that sweep, that classic sweep. Now, if you go all the way up, you're going to start getting into kind of getting that self-oscillating kind of a sound. Right, so if I go all the way down, it's going to sound a little bit more nicer. So pretty standard controls that you get on any kind of a subtractive synth, because this is what it is at the end. So then you get two more options. You get the drive and you get the key track. So the drive is just going to be that. You're going to be adding a little bit of drive to the filter stage. Now, when this is all the way down, it means that it's off, right? So we get no drive. So let me just do something like that and a little bit of resonance. Something like that, okay? So if I play something, we're just getting that sound. Now, the drive all the way down, it means off. If you go to the middle, and notice it says 50% right here, you get the indicator right here. So you're doing 50% of this drive. So you're going to be getting... You're going to get a little bit more aggressive, and notice it sounds kind of overdriven. Overdriven, it sounds like, that you have a drive right there. Now, if I go right here at the top, you're doing 100%. So this is, of course, will change how it sounds. It will just be a little bit louder. And it will just sound different. Notice that this one is much cleaner. This one sounds dirty. So that's the difference between, this drive control. It's a very useful sound. Sometimes you have something that lacks a little bit of a attitude or something else. So you can go up in drive and you can add something else. Okay, so then let me just go all the way down, all the way up, and right here down in resonance, you have the key track. Now the key track, what we'll do, and this is something very standard on any kind of a synthesizer, what it will do, it will make your higher keys sound brighter and your lower keys sound less brighter. Now let me give you an example. If I go to the filter and I go all the way down, it kind of makes sense that we are cutting a lot of high frequencies. So if I play low keys, notice that we can hear them. Maybe you're going to go right there. We can't hear them because their main frequency is going to be on the lows, so we can hear them. Now, as soon as I go up to higher frequencies and play higher keys, we are just going to be getting less of them because we are cutting a lot of high frequencies. And if I keep going up, we can barely hear them. And this is a problem. Maybe you're just going to be playing low keys and high keys, and the low keys are just you're going to be listening to them because they are there. You're not cutting them, but the higher keys you're just cutting a lot, so you cannot hear them. So the key track, what it will do, it will create kind of an envelope, something like that. So the higher keys will sound a little bit more brighter from the instruction they have right here, and the lower keys are just going to stay the same pretty much, or sound a little bit lower. So in simple terms, if I play a higher key just like this one is just going to be moved behind the scenes a little bit right there so we can hear them. And if I play a lower key just like this one is just going to go and be moved a little bit to the other side because they're lows and we can hear them already. So of course, doing this manually with the filter kind of sucks. So the key track is going to create that envelope for us, So right now, we are not doing anything. So if I play low keys and high keys, we can just barely hear the high keys. So you can do a key track of 50%, which is going to be, not full. So lower keys are going to be right there. If I go to a higher key, notice that now we can hear it a little bit better. If I go to no key tracking, it's just much silent. If I go up, we can hear them more. And if I go up, we can hear them more. So again, higher keys are going to be brighter and lower keys are just not going to be that brighter. So now if I maybe go to a lower keys, we can still hear the lower keys, right? That's going to still work. But now if I go to higher, we can really hear them. If I go all the way off, the higher keys are going to be very silent. We can still hear them, but not that present. So maybe this all the way to 100 is maybe a little bit too aggressive for the higher keys. So you can go to 50% and fix that problem. Right, so that's how how the key track works. And it depends on what you're building. Sometimes having the key track all the way up is not going to help you. It's just going to make your patch or whatever it is that you're playing sound bad. Right, so the next thing we need to talk about is going to be the amp EG. So this is going to be the envelope, or what is going to be controlling how the volume comes out of the synthesizer. Right now, we have no release, all the way to sustain up, no decay, and no attack. So again, this controls how the volume goes out. And you have your classic ADSR, of course. So the attack, if you don't know, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of explaining because this is a family show, and I am assuming that you know very little of synthesis, and maybe you don't know or you don't have very clear how an ADSR envelope works. So, of course, when you play a key, the sound is going to, of course, go out. So, behind the scenes, there's something after the filter telling the envelope to open and close, and that's going to be a gate. That's how the amp envelope knows how to let the sound pass. Now, when it goes through here, this one is going to be telling how it should be passing. So you have an attack and a decay. These ones are time knobs. Then you have a sustain, which is going to be a level knob. And the release is going to be a time knob. So let's start from the attack. So the attack is going to be, and for now, it's just going to go all the way down to the release. So if I play a key, notice that we get nothing. We get kind of a clicky sound, and it's because we have no sustain. It's all the way down. So the attack will provide an instruction in how slowly we are going to go up in amplitude. Right now, it's super fast. That's why we get that clicky sound. It's going up, and then it's going really down, and it's going all the way down to 0. We hear nothing, and it's going down really fast. So if I do attack, remember this is a time knob. It's going to be how long it will take for the sound to go up in amplitude. And in this case, if I go up, it's going to take a longer time. So if I play a key, it's going to take a long time to go up. And then at some point, the sound is going to die. That's why this is a time knob. So if I go all the way up, it's going to take almost 1 second to go up. And then the sound is going to die. If I go all the way up, it's just going to be a little bit more than 1 second. It's going to go up, and then it's going to die. Now, of course, maybe I want this kind of a slow introduction of the sound. I'm going to maybe put it right there, so make it a little bit obvious. But I don't want the sound to die right away. Well, that's going to be the decay, and this means how long the sound will take to will take from going up and then go down. So maybe we don't want this cutting of the sound. So what I want to do, I want to slowly go down. So I'm going to go up. And then the sound is going to go slowly down. So again, these ones are time knobs. How long is going to take to go up and how long is going to take to go down. Right, so that's what it means. Now, then you have the sustain knob. So this is going to be kind of working when you play and you hold keys pretty much. So the sustain is not a time knob, it's a level knob. So the sound right now is going all the way up and then it's going all the way down. But maybe we don't want to do this. Maybe we want to stay somewhere in between. We don't want to go all the way down. So if I play and hold, notice that it's going up all the way down. But if I provide a little bit of sustain, instead of going all the way down, it's just gonna let us kind of stay somewhere in between. And notice that you can do this while you're pressing and holding a key. If I go all the way up, we just go all the way up. You're disabling the decay stage. So now there's no decay. Just gonna stay all the way up. But maybe what I want to do, I want to go all the way up in volume, then go down, and then I want to stay right there. So this is what's gonna happen. It's gonna go up slowly, go down to the decay, and then it's gonna stay right there on the sustain stage. And of course this happens, well, because I'm holding a key. Right. So if I play and hold, it's gonna go up, go down, and it's gonna be right there on the sustain. So now the release, again, is a time knob. And this means how long will it take for the sound to go to full silence. So right now, if I release a key, this one is all the way down to nothing. If I release it, it dies right away. But if we provide some release, it's gonna take some time to go all the way to silence. If I release it, it's just slowly going down. So this one is a time knob, just like the attack and the decay, and this one is level. If I go all the way up in the release, it's gonna take much more time, of course, to go to full silence. And I release the key, and it's taking a long time. So that's how envelopes work on a nutshell. I'm gonna go to kind of a default configuration, which is gonna be no attack, no decay, all the way up on the sustain and all the way down in the release. It's gonna sound like that. Okay, so the next thing on the list is going to be the EG. So EG means envelope generator. And this is an envelope. It's just going to generate an envelope just like this one, but this one is a little bit different. We can use this envelope, we can use it to do some modulations. And what we can modulate with this envelope is going to be the cutoff, the pitch of the oscillator number 2, and then the pitch of the oscillator number 1. That's what we can do, and that's why we get this target. So, okay, so again, you have an attack and a decay just like the amp EG. Now, the only difference is that you don't get a full envelope like you get with the attack, decay, sustain, release of the amp. You just get an attack and you just get a decay. You don't have a release and you don't have a sustain stage. And this knob is going to be the intensity. Envelope generator intensity is how much of the effect you want to do to what, these sources we have right here. So one of the most common things that you do on any kind of a given synthesizer, a subtracted synth at least, is modulating the cutoff frequency. So if I go all the way down to nothing, or maybe something like there, I'm going to be playing a key, and it's going to sound, of course, very silent because we are cutting a lot of frequencies. So maybe when I press a key, I want this envelope to tell the filter to modulate something like that, right? Which is kind of a very common thing. So you do it with this control. Now notice that the target is going to be the cutoff. So we are going to be modulating the cutoff by how much. And this one, notice that if you move it on at home, it has kind of a stopping point right there, a kind of a break point. So it's because you can go into negatives or you can go into positives. In this case, we're going to go into positives because I want to move this knob from here up, and then we go down, just like the envelopes. We go up in amplitude and we go down with the amp EG. Well, this is the same thing. We're going to go up on this knob and then we're going to go down on this knob. And how are we going to do it? Well, again, you get your attack and your decay. How long is it going to take to go up and how long is it going to take to go down? So if you want something fast and then you want for this to kind of go super fast right here and then slowly go back, going to be doing maybe no attack and a little bit more of decay. And how much of this effect is going to be the EG intensity. If you go up or maybe something like there, notice that if I keep going up, of course you have much more intensity. So what we are doing, we are just going to this filter, going all the way up and then going all the way down. Now the decay is a little bit long. So if I make it shorter, it's going to take less time to go back to this original position. So we get kind of a pluck. Right? So, that's how it works. If I go all the way down up on the decay, it's going to take a long time to go back. So if I play fast notes, it will just have no time to go back. Now, if I go all the way down on the decay, we have the same problem. It's just going to be kind of a pluck because everything is too short. And if we provide a little bit of decay, maybe we want that kind of a slowly going up. So we provide a little bit of attack. and we get that classic, sync sound. Maybe we provide a little bit of resonance. Notice that is doing the modulation right there. Maybe we can add a little bit of drive, and we get kind of a classic sound. Maybe it's too aggressive. Gonna do something like that, and we get, a very classic sound. Right, so that's pretty much it, how it works. Okay, so I'm gonna go maybe to a default patch right now. We're starting from the scratch, and I'm using pretty much the same on the oscillator, kind of a territory. I'm gonna use a saw, and we are gonna be going to a saw, and then go right there, and then go right there. And we are doing nothing of the filter. Now, notice that you have the cutoff, but you also have the pitch of the 2 and the pitch of the 1. So you can run a modulation. Right now, we are just listening to the oscillator number 1. And if I go up on the oscillator number 2, now we get both. Now, of course, you can go to the pitch of the number 1, and you can do a little bit of intensity. And now this one is going to be running a modulation. Right? The envelope is going to be modulating the pitch of the envelope of the oscillator number 1. How much? Of course, this is going to be deciding how much. Right? Now, if you want to do the pitch of the number 2, I go right there. Notice that we don't get a modulation on the number 1. But if I go down on the number 1 and we go to the number 2, we are getting it right there. Right? So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So a few sections ago, we were talking about the VCO1 and the number 2, and we talked about the sync. And we talked about how cool is the sync when you start modulating the pitch. You get that classic oscillator sound. So that's why you get pitch 2 and pitch 1. We can get that effect right here. So right now I'm going to go to no modulation, and I'm going to just select the pitch of the number 2. I'm going to go up on the mixer of the 1. So we have the 1 and the 2 running right now. So, right? So we get both oscillators. And in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be enabling sync. So now we get that sync sound. But of course, it's no fun because we are not doing any modulations. Since I'm going to pitch number 2, I'm going to go up in the intensity, and I'm going to be doing something, maybe something very little for now. And you're going to get, again, that sweet oscillator sync sound. So in this case, I'm going to go maybe... Now we are doing a lot of modulation to the envelope. And if I go to lower and maybe go to a square. Now I'm doing a lot, so the intensity is a lot. We can do a little bit less. Maybe get something in between. Right? So again, super cool, sweet sound. So I'm gonna go back for now. So that's what you can do with the EG, with the envelope generator. Now you have some extra options right here that are super relevant. Now, for example, maybe I'm gonna go to the cutoff because we know that this one, it's a very simple example that we can really hear. I'm gonna go down on the VCO number 2. So what we get is a little bit of modulation on the filter, right? And we're gonna do something a little bit more aggressive. Maybe something like that with a bit of resonance, and we're gonna get something like, right? We get something like that. So when you go to the edit mode, I'm gonna go to the edit. You have 3 options. The program edit, it means that you have, different parameters that you can change for this patch. So if I go there to program edit, the option number 8, remember it's 4, then 4 is gonna be this one. Notice that it gives you the modulation option. And right here is going to say EG velocity. So if it's 0, it means that the velocity of whatever it is that you're playing right here will not affect this control, will not affect this modulation. But if you go to higher values, and for now I'm just going to go all the way up so we can really hear this or just notice difference, I'm going to go all the way up. So if I go and do something like that, I'm going to be playing very softly. And notice that we don't get that modulation. Now if I press harder, we are going to get it. Let me just do it with the other keyboard because kind of set it up this one to do a different thing. I'm going to do very slowly instruction. I'm going to do maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to be pressing a key harder right now. Notice that we get a lot. Right? So we get that modulation. We can hear it. Maybe I'm doing very little from this one. If I play softly, we get nothing or less. And if I play harder, we get that modulation. And you can, I guess you can hear me tapping the keys of the MIDI keyboard. And right here, kind of changed the configuration in this keyboard to use it for something else. So I'm gonna need to go to maybe configurations, change some things because it's not super reactive to velocity. It's just kind of a very linear. But again, we can kind of do the same thing right here. If I play very soft, and then if I go very hard, we're gonna be getting that modulation. Soft, and then high. So this is the EG velocity. If I go all the way down, this is not going to react to the velocity. It's just going to be the same if I play hard or if I play soft. So if I go right here, notice that if I tap one more time right there, you're going to find an option that says amp velocity. So the amp velocity is pretty much the same we are getting right here, but in terms of how it works, it's going to be, you know, less volume or more volume. If you play softer, it's just less volume. If you play harder, more velocity, it's just going to be a little bit louder. That's pretty much what it means. Now, notice that sometimes by mistake, I'm playing something and I'm getting something like that. And it's because I'm using a key step because I'm very, you know, I have the camera right here, the lights, the microphone. So I'm not in this position. I'm just on the sides. So I'm using a MIDI keyboard, an external MIDI keyboard to control the sound. So this one has aftertouch. So sometimes I kind of make a mistake and I press harder and I get that modulation. So the next option when you go to the same control, it's going to be what your MIDI aftertouch is going to do. In this case, it's saying, okay, so it's going to go up on the LFO intensity. So it's going to go, it's going up on this one. And we can just, you know, change different parameters. What it's going to be doing is going to mod time, mod depth, reverb time. This is talking about the effects. But we can modulate or do a lot of different things with the MIDI aftertouch. Notice that you can change the shape, modulate the pitch. You can do a lot of things with the aftertouch. So this is where you're going to be setting that up for each patch. All right, so I'm going to go to cutoff, you know, something that, you know, we always do, we do the whole time. And if I play harder, as I'm doing that effect with the aftertouch, you don't have the aftertouch with this one, but the synth can recognize aftertouch, of course. All right, so now, of course, we know how this works. Notice that we are going from on the filter from here all the way up because we are going up on the intensity. But notice that this can go into negatives. If I go the other way, it's just going to go into negatives. So how this is going to be working. Now, if I do the same, maybe the same modulation that we are doing before, we know how it sounds. But if I do the same, but the opposite, you're going to go into negatives. So if I play something, you know, you're not getting anything. You're just going to get nothing. And it's because the instruction is inverted. You're just inverting the envelope. So in this case, what we are doing, since we are inverting the instruction, we are saying start here and go down. So it makes sense. We are starting here and then going down and then up. So if we are using we are inverting the instruction, maybe I want to start up on the cutoff. So this one will start from here. It will go all the way down and then go back. You know, it's just the same thing, but backwards. And of course, this changes the sound or how the envelope works in terms of how we modulate the cutoff. Right? Right, so that's what you do when you know, you use it on negatives. So before we can start with anything with the LFO, I'm going to do no modulation and I'm going to go maybe all the way on the cutoff and no resonance, or just maybe leave it right there. Or you know what? We're going to go to a default patch. We can start on the default patch so we can all start from the same place. No resonance. Right. So right here you get your tempo knob, and this one will adjust the tempo or the BPM of the clock of your synthesizer. If you're not connected to anything, it means that it's going to be using the internal clock. If you're connected to a DAW and you need to change this in the configuration, we're going to talk about this much later. This is going to be following the BPM of your DAW or any other thing that you're using to sync your synthesizer. So in this case, I'm using the internal clock, so I'm going to be going to 120 BPMs or something like that. And this matters because the LFO is going to go into a rate. It's going to follow a speed. It needs to follow something. So in this case, it's going to be following the 120 BPM. So the LFO, it's again very limited. I'm going to go all the way down on the intensity, and I'm going to go all the way down here. So you get the target, which is where it works pretty much like the envelopes. You can modulate the cutoff, you can modulate the shape, and it means this shape, the oscillator number 1 and the oscillator number 2, and you can modulate the pitch of the 1 and the 2, and also the multi-engine, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. So, which waveforms can you use to do an LFO? Right here, you get it. You get a saw, you get a triangle, or you can do a square. And for now, I'm just going to go to a saw. So, this is the rate, how fast it's going to go. And this is the intensity, how much modulation, how much is this LFO are you going to be doing on these 3 different sources, right? So, pretty understandable. So, okay, so right here, you have 3 options. So, you get the BPM, you get the middle one, which is the normal one, and the one shot. So the BPM, it means that when you move your rate knob, you're going to be kind of a following. And notice that right now I get subdivisions. Look at right here. You get the subdivisions, and it's because it's using the tempo of your synthesizer. So you're going to be able to sync up with the velocity, the tempo of your synth, or maybe your DAW, whatever it is that you're using. So yeah, super cool. Right? It's a very useful thing. Now the other one, the normal mode, oh, not that one, this one, the normal mode, is just going to go free, right? So instead of going up in subdivisions, you're going to go up in hertz in this case. So it's going to go up and then go down. So again, it's kind of a free mode. You're not syncing to anything. And then you have the one shot. Now the one shot means that it's going to be running just once. And we're going to, of course, test this in a minute. So first I'm going to go to the BPM, and we want to do something with the LFO. In this case, since we know the filter, I'm going to be modulating the filter. If I play a key, nothing is going to happen. So of course you need to provide a rate. In this case, I'm going to go kind of, like there. And then as you go up, it's just going to start modulating your filter. And again, this works just like this one, but you only get positives right here. Right. And of course, if you go up in rate, you're going to go faster, or you're going to go slower. Right. So remember, you can do saw, or you can do a triangle right there. Or maybe you can use a square. And the square is kind of an on and off kind of a fashion. Right, so very simple. It's just a very standard LFO so far. Then when you go to free mode, notice that this is going to be changing a little bit, and you don't have subdivisions. You can go faster or slower. Right, so pretty simple. So let's talk about the other things, because this is just kind of interesting. I'm going to keep the saw for now, and I'm going to go to, I'm going to go right there. I'm going to go to maybe normal mode. So you can modulate the cutoff, which, very understandable, but you can also modulate the shape, and the shape is going to be this one. And this again is going to give you a different sound. If I go down on the intensity, of course you're going to do nothing, so you can do just a little bit of this. You're going to get a cool sound. Now you can also do pitch. And notice how it sounds. So what we are doing right now, we are modulating it with the saw. And the saw starts up and then goes down. So we don't have a ramp. It's not slowly going up and then restarting. It's starting very hard and then goes down. So if we go to the cutoff, we can easily hear this. We start high and then go down. Now, why am I telling you this? Now, what you can do, you can go right here, and this is kind of some of the extras that you have on this one. You can invert whatever it is that you're doing. So if I'm going to go right here to the intensity, I'm going to be holding down shift. And this is, again, remember the modulation that we are kind of running. Let me just do more intensity. If I go to shift and move it just a little bit, what I'm doing, I'm swapping, I'm just inverting the waveform. Notice that now it's going backwards. It's a ramp up and then a ramp down. As soon as you move it without holding the shift, you're going to go going back to the other mode, the default one. So, you need to be careful right here. So if you need to hold shift, and then you're going to be inverting the instruction. So same thing with this one, but again, it's just pretty much the same thing because you're using a triangle, and the other one is just pretty much the same thing because it's a square, right? It's an on and off kind of instruction, so inverting it makes no sense. But in the case of the saw, it's a very useful kind of a thing. Let's say that you want to go to pitch, right? And you want to do something like that. Maybe you want to go really slow, and you want to do that, slowly go up in pitch. Let me just do something like that. And right now it's going up in pitch and then going down to the original pitch because we have a ramp down. But maybe you want to ramp up. So right here, you're going to be adjusting this, and now it's going to ramp down, going down from lower frequencies, going up to our pitch. Again, a very, very useful thing. So you also have the one-shot mode. And this one, it's very simple. Right now, we are just modulating the pitch by some rate. Maybe let me just make it a little bit more obvious with the cutoff. Let me do a little bit of that. Let me go right there. Now, if I go to the other one, to the other mode, there we go. I'm gonna go faster, right? So we know that on the other modes, we run the LFO, and the LFO is just gonna be running constantly. It's an LFO. It's a constant instruction, and it's like a loop. It restarts over and over again on each cycle. But maybe you don't want to do this. Maybe you just want to run it once. So one shot is gonna mean that you're just gonna be pressing, it runs once, and that's it. That's why you don't get a greater effect. Right? You just get it once. Same with the pitch. If I go to the pitch, notice that we get it once. And if I go slower so we can really hear this, it's going to go there to the current frequency, and then it's going to die. It's just not going to restart the LFO. It's just going to run it once, one shot. Okay, so I'm going to go back to nothing, maybe a little bit of intensity, and I'm just for now going to leave it there. Maybe I'm going to go there. And I'm going to go maybe right here. I'm going to go to the square. So the square, again, it's kind of an on and off instruction. And I'm maybe going to use this to show you a couple of extra features that you get on the with the LFO. So when you go to edit mode, you're going to go right here. You're going to enter the program edit. And if you go to the option number 7, remember you have the first 4, then the second 4. This is going to be the 8. This is going to be the 7. So if you go to the 7, you have 3 different options for this LFO. And you have LFO target all as C. Okay, so what does this mean? So right now it says all. So it means that when you go to shape, for example, you're going to be modulating within LFO the shape of both oscillators, right? Makes sense. But if you go to other options, you can maybe just do 1 and 2. Oh, sorry. If you go all, it's going to be the 3 oscillators, the multi-engine included. Now, if you go to the other one, the next option with the encoder, you're going to be modulating BCO1 and 2, and the multi-engine is going to be left alone. And if I go to the other one, you're going to be modulating just BCO2, right? So super, super cool. And the other one is going to be multi-engine. Right, so you have different options and you can choose what you want to modulate. And this applies for the pitch and the shape, of course. And remember, again, we talked about, the sync, how cool it sounds when we start modulating the slave oscillator. Well, you could just target the VCO2 and get that, effect, but with an LFO now. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to be targeting all. Now, I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to press it one more time. And you're going to see something that says LFO key sync. Now, by default, and right now it's on, and by default it's on, the LFO, it's a constant instruction. So it's going to, start, its cycle, and it's going to go on and go on and go on. So it doesn't care if you play a new key, right? It will not restart. The LFO will not restart its cycle. It's just going to keep going. Now on this one, by default, it's on. So it means that if you're doing something, it's just going to restart it every single time. Now I'm going to be turning it off, right? I'm going to just turn it off. And remember, we are doing, and for now I'm going to go on and just show you. I'm going to press a key and we have that square. By the intensity, we are just modulating the pitch of the LFO, of the oscillator. So we get that kind of a on, off, or go high or go low, or maybe we can go to the cutoff and we get that kind of a on and off instruction, right? It's just kind of a turning it on and then off, all the way up and all the way down. So if I turn it off, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it several times and just going to keep tapping the key. And notice that sometimes it's going to be on and sometimes it's going to be off. Same with the pitch. Sometimes we're going to get it and sometimes we will not get it. Right? So we get something different every time we kind of press a key. So if I go to on, this one, what it will do, it will restart the cycle of the LFO. So we always start from the beginning of the LFO, right? So if we always start from the beginning, it's going to start from the beginning of the waveform. So if I do the same thing, every time I play a key, it's going to be a constant thing because we are always starting from the same place on the LFO. That's why, we get a constant sound and the sound is not changing. And off, it will not restart the LFO. So sometimes we're going to get it, or we're going to be getting it on a different part on the LFO, whatever the LFO is at that point in time. Right, so that's, what the key sync means. And for now, just going to leave it on. That's the default option. Now I'm going to go to the next one. The next one is going to be the voice sync. Okay, so the voice sync is a little bit kind of hard to explain. Now, if you turn it off, and this is how, the synthesizer, a polyphonic synthesizer pretty much works behind the scenes, how it gets, how it's built. What you can see right here, most of what you can see right here, it's being duplicated several times internally, right? So if you get one board for your synthesizer for your panel, you're going to get 4 different boards because you have 4 different voices. That's why, polyphonic instruments are just much more expensive, unless, of course, they are digital. But in case of analog synthesizers, you're gonna get this duplicated by 4 because you have 4 different voices. So since you have 4 different, boards, let's say, and you have 4 different voices, they can all do different things at some point in time with the LFO because they are 4 separate different things. So what the LFO voice sync, it means when it's on, and by default it's on, it means that when you play 4 keys, and you're playing polyphonic because you're in poly, the LFO will control the 4 voices at the same time. For example, I'm going to go outside. We're going to do, what are we doing? Let's go to a triangle. And I'm going to go to the pitch, and I'm going to be doing something like that. So I'm going to be playing a key, or maybe this one. I'm going to be playing a new key, I'm going to be playing a new key, and I'm going to be playing a new key. And I want you to look at the spectrum. Notice how it moves. Everything kind of moves at the same time. And this is because the 4 voices are using the same LFO. They move the same way because it's one LFO for the 4 different voices. So what is the other option? Because this makes sense. You have 4 different voices. Everything is just following the same LFO. It's just going to make sense. But the other one is just going to be a little bit crazy. I'm going to go right there. I'm going to be turning this off. So now remember, behind the scenes, all 4 different voices are going to be independent. And they are independent from each other, right? And we have a 4. So when you turn this off and I play something, this one is going to be following, maybe I'm going to go right here. This one is following this LFO, right? So now if I press this new key, notice that we get something different. And at some point in time, I'm going to be playing this one. And I'm going to do a 7. I want you to look at the spectrum again and notice how different everything moves. Right, so this means now that every time that we play a key, that voice is going to be using one instance of the LFO. So if I press a key, that's going to be following one LFO. If I press a different key at some point in time, that key is going to be using a different kind of a LFO at a different point in time of whatever the LFO is. So if I press this key, this one is using one LFO. Now, if I press this key, this one is going to be doing something with a different LFO at a different point in time because they are on different places. They are offsetted. And if I play a new key, that one is going to be starting on a different point on the LFO, and so on and so on and so on. So for each different voice, you could be starting on a different point on the LFO. That's why you get this, movement of the frequencies. Now, since we are talking about voices, for now, I'm just going to be turning this off. And it doesn't matter. When you go right here, notice that we are in Program Edit. Every time that we change something on the Program Edit, we are changing it for that preset. So if I go right there and I go out and I go back, we are just deleting everything that we did, right? They are not globals. If you go to Global Edit, you're going to be changing the global settings of your whole synthesizer. Again, we're going to talk about that later. Now I'm back to a default patch. So now what we need to do, we need to talk about voices. Since, we were talking about voices and the LFO, now we're going to talk about the voice modes. Okay, so you have different, different options, and I believe that this one, at this point, maybe it's a little bit obvious for you, and you already kind of know what this does. I'm just gonna show you, anyways. So you have the first one, which is poly, which means that you have a 4-voice polyphony. Let me do a little bit of cutting, because if not, it's just a little bit too bright. So you can play up to 4 different keys at the same time. 4-voice polyphony. Pretty simple. Notice that right here you get your voice mode depth. Now this is kind of a control that it's going to be doing multiple things. If you're in poly, what you can do if you go up, notice that it says poly, 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 duo. What the F is duo? Okay, so first before we can talk about duo, I'm going to be taking you to the unison. Now, the unison mode, what it does is going to grab your 4 voices and it's going to stack the four voices on top of each other, right? That's what it's going to be doing. Now, the thing is that you don't have polyphony. It's just going to convert this into a monophonic synthesizer. So you cannot do 4 keys at the same time. You just can press only one at a time, monophonic. If I play many, it doesn't matter, right? It's just going to be playing one of these 3 keys I'm playing. So this is going to be working monophonically. You can only use 1 key at a time. Very simple to understand. Now, of course, when you're stuck in 4 different voices, and this is what is happening right now, notice it sounds kind of a little bit phasey. And it's because, of course, the 4 analog voices sometimes are a little bit different. So they are a little bit offsetted. So you're going to be getting that kind of a phasey sound, but they're really, really close. So with unison, what you can do, you can spread the voices. You can going to be detuning the voices from each other just a little bit. So if I go right here and I start moving this knob, this is how much detuning you're going to be doing. And this is going to give you that sound, that, bigger than life sound. Right? So that's how you get, to get that unison sound. Now, of course, if you go really high, you're just the voices, all the 4 voices are going to be really detuned. And again, unison, this is a very classic thing. I'm pretty sure you already knew about this. And I'm going to go back to poly. Now, remember I told you I'm going to be playing this why you get duo right now. So since you have 4 different voices and this has the ability of doing unison, what you can do on the poly, you can divide and make this a kind of a duophonic kind of a synthesizer. So if you can play 1 key, you can play 2 keys, but you cannot play 3 and you cannot play 4, right? Notice that it's just changing. So you can only play 2 keys, duophonic. Now, the cool thing is that notice that when I go and enter into the duo mode, it's going to give you values and you can go up and up and up and up and up. So this means that, of course, the 4 voices, 2 of the voices are going to be on 1 key and the other 2 voices are going to be on the other key. So you're going to be doing that unison detune with two voices when you use duo. And if you go up, we can really hear the difference. Notice that we are getting that unison sound on one key. So this is two voices being detuned. And if I go to the other one, we get the same thing on this one. Two voices right here being detuned. So that's what this control means, the duo. And that's why you can go to a value right there, right? So very simple. I'm going to go all the way down and we're going to talk about the rest. Right, so then if you go down, you get the chord mode. And this is what it says, what it is. It's a chord mode. You play a key and it's going to give you a chord. Now, this gives you a different thing. Now, on the unison, and this is one thing that sometimes, it's a little bit annoying. Sometimes you want to use a real mono kind of a sound. And if you go to the unison, you never get it. It's four voices stacked on, on top of each other. So you're not really doing mono. You're just doing unison, but the voices are just all the way down, right? It's not real mono. So if you go to chord, the first mode right here is going to be mono. So this is a real mono kind of a synth. You're going to get one voice and it's going to be mono because you cannot play more than four keys. It's just one voice per key, right? Or, one voice, just one voice. Now then, of course, the chord mode can do chords. And as you go up, you're going to be getting, the different chords. You can do a fifth, and let me just go right there. You can do a fifth, you can do a suspended, you can do a minor, and so on, and so on, and so on. Right? So you can do a lot of chords. This is the main purpose of the chord mode, right? So again, just pretty simple. Okay, so the next one on the list is going to be the ARP. So whenever you do an ARP, of course, it's just going to give you an ARP. So if I make a chord, and for now, I'm just going to go to a lower. I'm going to go do like that. And whatever is that you're doing, and right now I'm just making a triad, right? Just a triad, a C triad. It's just going to do that ARP. It's going to recognize whatever is that you're playing, and it's just going to go and do it. Pretty simple, right? Now, of course, what happens if I release it? The ARP is going to stop. And maybe, again, you just don't want this. You want to sustain it. So if you're go one more time, it's going to start blinking. This means that you're still on ARP, but you're latching. So if you play a key and you hold it and you release it, it's going to keep doing that ARP. And you're latching whatever it is that you're doing. So if you go one more time down, it's just going to disable that latch. So now on the ARP mode, this control is going to decide what type of ARP you're going to get. And you are going to be getting different types. To get the manual, we're going to talk about that in a second. Then manual 2, then rise, then fall 2, then rise fall 1, rise fall 2, and so on, and poly and random. So you kind of get a lot of these ones. And you do get a description, a very good description on the manual of what they can do. I'm going to show you right now. Now, the manual 1, and for now, I'm just going to go to manual 1 right there, manual 1. So this one, what it means is that whatever you play right here is going to be remembered and it's going to be played. So the order on where you play the keys matters. So if I do this, it's going to start doing this. If I go there, that's going to be the second one. So now if I do something in between like this and play like this, notice that the ARP is just going to moving on a different way. It's just not going from up and down. It's just not going from here to here. It's just following the order of the keys I played. So then the other one, the other mode, it's going to be manual 2. You might be thinking, okay, so what's the difference? So if I play a chord, of course, it's still going to remember the order of the keys I play. But notice it sounds a little bit different. I'm not doing a minor triad. So what it will do, it will play one loop or one round of whatever octave you're just doing it, and then it's going to repeat the same thing one octave higher. And we can really hear this. If I go down in tempo and I go really slow, we can really hear what am I playing and one up. It's 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, and one octave higher. So this is what the manual is going to do. So it works the same as manual 1, but it will just repeat it one octave higher. That's all. So if I keep going up on the list, you're going to find the rise. and then you're going to find rise 2. So this one follows the same example. So rise is going to be, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In this case, 1, 3, 5, because I'm doing a minor. So again, it's going to rise from the bottom, from the lower key, and it's going to go up to the higher key, and then we'll just restart. This has no idea what you're pressing, what your keys, what you're playing right here. It cannot remember, it cannot remember the order. So it's just going to go and rise. Pretty simple. So then the rise 2 is pretty much the same thing. Then the manual 2 is going to do it on this, and then it's going to go up. Right. Same as the manual 2 is going to go and repeat it 1 octave higher. So then you have the fall, and you might be thinking, okay, so the fall is just the opposite of rise. It's just going to start higher and then go down, from higher key on your arpeggio, the highest one, and then go to the next one, and then go to the next one if you're doing a triad, right? It's going to start here, then go here, and then go here. Well, not really. This one is going to go, is this one, then high, and then this. Is going to be this, which is the first, the fifth, and the third if I'm doing a minor triad chord. And that's how it works. It makes no sense to me because maybe you should use a different name instead of fall. Now the other one, the fall 2, is going to do the same thing than the other ones. But notice that it's just kind of really falling down. And it's just a little bit weird why the fall 1 works a little bit different than the fall 2. Because right now it's really going up and down, and it's going from the highest 1 octave higher and then really going down until we reach the last key, which is going to be this one, right? So again, it's just a little bit weird. And I'm going to go to the next one, and the next one is going to be a combination, rise and fall. So I'm going to be doing it. Maybe you notice what this is doing? It's doing 1, 3, 5, then going back and then going back. Is doing just that, right? Pretty simple. And if I go to the other one, you can guess what this means. It's just going to do the same thing and then 1 octave higher. And again, I'm making a triad right here. Alright, so if I go maybe to poly, well, this one is going to be a little bit special. So notice with the other ones, and right now I'm going to go there to rise and fall. If I make a chord, of course, it will not make a chord. It's just going to be kind of a cycling through the keys we are playing. So the poly is going to do that. Instead of cycling whatever it is that you're doing, it's just going to recognize that you're playing a chord. And it's just gonna, of course, play whatever it is that you're doing. Pretty simple. So then if you go to poly number 2, and you might be thinking, okay, so poly number 2 is gonna be doing the same thing and then playing it an octave higher, just like the other, options. Nope, that's not how it works. And again, the ARP is just a little bit weird with what they have chosen. So this is going to be playing the same chord I'm playing, the same thing that poly number 1, but it will do it half tempo. Yeah, a little bit weird, but that's fine. Okay. So then you have the odd one, which is going to be random, and you can guess what this is. It's going to be random, pretty simple. Right, so it's just going to be random. So then you have different modes of random, and this is going to be a little bit weird. Maybe gonna go right here, play 1 octave and then an octave higher, just this octave and this octave, and I'm gonna be playing them at the same time. Notice that it's just kind of playing both at the same time. So that's how it works. It's a little bit weird. It's not doing random, it's just playing both at the same time. Now the difference with the random 2 is like it's going to be randomizing things as you introduce more keys. So for example, I'm going to do this right now, and I'm going to be introducing a new key. I'm playing 2 keys, I'm going to be doing 1 more. Notice that now it's doing the random when I introduce a new key, and if I introduce more keys, then it's going to be randomizing this. And it works just kind of a chord mode, but it's not playing all the keys at the same time. It's just kind of a randomizing what I'm playing. That's how it works. Again, it's a little bit weird, but that's how it works. So it's randomizing all the keys I have played. Sometimes it's going to be this together, sometimes it's going to be this, sometimes it's going to be this. So that's how it works. It's just, again, a little bit weird. And then you have the other one, which is going to be random 3. And random 3, it's just pretty much the same than random 2. But guess what? It's going to go 1 octave higher. So if I do the same trick than before, notice that we get lower and higher, and it's randomizing between the octaves, you know, this octave and the next one, and it will work the same way. Now, it is weird, but this could just lead you to some cool sounds. Alright. So there's one more thing, and for now I'm just going to go to something simple like manual 1, where I'm going to be making a triad, and it's just going to do the triad for me. Pretty simple, pretty understandable. So if you go to edit mode, you have the sec edit. Well, that's going to be where you need to go if you want to, and you need to press this button again, if you want to change some things on the ARP. And notice that you have a lot of options to edit the sequence. We're going to talk about that on the next video. But right here, what you can do, you have some options with the ARP. You can go to BPM, of course, we already know. If you go to the second one, it's going to be ARP parameter or parameter, whatever you want to call it. And notice that it has a rate. So if I play it right now, you can play with the rates. And this is something very, very, very useful when you use the sequencer, because you can going to be changing rates. It's just a cool thing. Does it go faster and faster and faster? Or if I go slower, we're still in tempo, but we are changing the rate. Right, so the next option inside here is going to be the gate time. And this is just kind of an important thing for the sequence as well. Right now, the gate time, by default on the sequence and the ARP, the gate time is going to be 75. And the gate time is going to be the duration of each note, right? So if by default it's 75, it means that we can go all the way up. And now, of course, notice it's like we are tying the different notes when we make a triad in this case. I'm always making a C minor triad because it's simple, and of course you can assume that if you don't see what I'm playing right here, because I wanted to fit more this on the full screen, and maybe the keyboard, it's just kind of not fitting the screen. And I'm always making a C minor triad so you can know what I'm doing. Always doing that. So notice that now it's going to be kind of doing like a tie, because the gate is just super long. Now if I go to the other way, now the gate time for each note is going to be super small. So, that's what the gate time is going to do. Right. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the multi-engine, which is going to be this one. Make sure you are on a default patch, right? It doesn't matter the positions, because we are going to be talking about this one alone. Now, this is a digital oscillator, and the advantage of that is that you get many, many waveforms, and you can control them on different ways that you cannot with an analog oscillators. Now, the multi-engine goes really, really deep, so we're going to spend some time learning how this works, because this one has, the display and then 2 knobs, but we have a lot of things going on behind the scenes. It goes really, really deep. Okay, so let's start with this one. I'm going to go all the way down and all the way down on the mixer. So nothing and nothing. And then I'm going to go all the way down, all the way up, all the multi-engine. So we're going to be listening just the multi-engine. So you have 3 different positions, right? You have the up, the down, and then you have the middle one. We're going to talk about the middle one right now because it's the one that has the waveforms. Then we're going to talk about the other ones. So right from the start, this works as a normal oscillator. You can select your normal waveforms, and you have a lot. You have like 17 different waveforms. So yeah, you have a lot, and they all sound different. Now, of course, you get your most common waveforms just like the other oscillators. You get the sine, you get the saw, you get the triangle, the square. Of course, you get them, but you also get a sine wave, which is something that you don't get on the other ones, right? And it's pretty cool, and it sounds like a sine wave. It's just a normal sine wave. Now then, of course, when you start going to the other oscillators, the other ones are going to say sine 2, but they're going to be sounding the same in this case. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. And then if you keep going up, they're going to start sounding different. Notice that they sound a little bit different, and the saw is going to sound like a saw, but if you keep going up, the other one is just going to start sounding different. So they do something behind the scenes that you cannot see. So okay, so you of course get the saw, the square, and then you get some other ones. I'm going to go all the way down to the sine wave. So the multi-engine, also called variable phase modulation, BPM, and you're going to find this all over the place on the manual if you go to the manual. So yeah, this gives you the phase modulation. Of course, you cannot get something super complex, and you cannot control it like you would with the Op 6, for example, from KORG. If I'm keeping it on the same family, you just cannot do that. Everything behind the scenes is just kind of prearranged, but you can control some values just to get this phase modulation. But each individual waveform has been programmed to be modulated in different ways. So if you go to the first one, which is the thin one, this is just a sine wave, simple view, right? It's just a sine wave. So behind the scenes, this one has a different sine wave modulating this one. So this one is going to be the sine, it's going to be the carrier, and since it has a different sine wave modulating this one, the other one is going to be called modulator. The other sine wave is going to be affecting this one. So again, we are talking about phase modulation. Some other waveform is modulating the phase of this one. Right? This one is the carrier. The one behind the scenes that we don't see is going to be the modulator. So how can we affect the carrier with the modulator? So it's going to be the shape control. If I go and play something, maybe I'll play a C, and I keep going up on the shape, notice that this is going to start changing. And if you go all the way up, you almost get to the noise kind of a section, to the noise. So yeah, that's what you get. So you get phase modulation. And that's, how phase modulation sounds. Now, of course, if I do it like this, it sounds like crap. That is not very pleasing. But once I release it and then I try to play something, you get different timbres. And when you combine them with the other ones, you can get a million sounds. Now, if you go all the way down, you are going to be getting your normal sine wave. And moving the shape, you're going to be controlling how much of this phase modulation you can do on this waveform. Now, if we talk about phase modulation, we are talking about the ratios, the ratio of the modulator. How can you change the ratios? You can. So if you go, for example, to this one, we can hear that here, I'm going to be pressing something, maybe right here, this key, and I'm going to be moving this one. But now, I'm going to be doing some phase modulation, and now I'm going to be pressing shift. As soon as I press shift, notice that it's going to start changing, and that is because we are changing the ratios. And that's what the shape does when you hold shift. You change the ratio of the modulator. Maybe it kind of went down. Let me just go there. Yeah. That's what you're doing. You can change the ratio of the modulator, and you can control the shape of how much modulation you do to the carrier. Now, if you're thinking, wait, what the F is a carrier? What the F is a modulator? Ratio? What is the ratio? So I created a dedicated section just to show you this, and we are going to be talking about that one in a minute. The only thing that you need to remember right now is that you have this one, which is the main one. You have something behind the scenes that is doing some kind of modulation, and then you have something called ratio. That's the only thing you need to remember. I'm going to be teaching you that part in a minute. So yeah, we can control the depth, how much we do, and the ratio. So if you think about an on-phase modulation, we can use envelopes. And the envelope, it will go before this one, and it's going to go from the modulator through the envelope, and then from the envelope, it's going to do the modulation to the carrier. And maybe you're wondering, okay, we don't have an envelope, a dedicated envelope. But we do. Yes, we do. And it's hidden on the menu. If you go right here to the program edit and you go to the step number 10, this is going to be 8, 9, 10. You go right here. It's going to say multi-engine, and you're going to be getting a bunch of options right here. Now, the first one is going to be feedback. Right now, I'm going to be doing nothing. And if I go up on the feedback, notice that we get something. Yeah, we do get something. Now, whenever you talk about phase modulation, you can have a feedback stage. Right now, notice that it's doing nothing. And it's because The one doing feedback is the modulator, not the carrier, the one that is hidden behind the scenes. So we are kind of a feedback into itself. So when you do some kind of a depth right here, notice that the feedback will affect how it sounds. So you have a feedback control, which is super cool. Also notice, let me go to the next category, and you have a noise. So if you know, you can also use noise, and noise will affect. And this is just noise. And these are standard tools that you get on a phase modulation synthesizer, or maybe an FM synthesizer. So if I go to the next category, you have the shape mod nth. And what the EVIS is? Well, this is the envelope. So the envelope, remember, it works like this one. So you don't need to learn anything new, right? The shape mod nth is going to behave like this one. You have a breaking point, which is going to be 0, and then you can go up or you can go into negatives. So same right here, you can go up or you can go into negatives. And this is the intensity of this control. Then, of course, you need to have an attack and a decay, right? You need an envelope to go from the modulator through the envelope and then to the carrier. So if you go to the next one, you're going to be having your attack, which is like this one. And then if you go to the next one, you're going to have your decay, which is like this one. Now, at the end of the day, what this is going to do is going to apply some envelope. It's like, for example, when we use this one, when we decide to maybe go to the cutoff, and we use a little bit of attack and a little bit of decay, and this is going to move this knob up and down. Well, this is pretty much the same with kind of this one, is how much we are going to be doing to that. Now, let me just show you how this works. I'm going to go right here to the shape mod nth, right? So we're going to provide some intensity. We're going to go maybe from here, and then maybe we're going to go up. Maybe I'm going to go right there. So that's the sound that we have right now. And maybe I'm going to go right there and just show you. This is the sound we have right now. And if I keep going up, notice that sound is going to change. And it's doing something. The thing is that the envelope, it's super, super short. It's like 0 and 0. That's why it's super fast. But we can go to the attack and decide that we want to do a slow kind of a ramp. So if I go and do something, and this is very aggressive, so you need to do just a little bit. And if I go do like this, I play. Maybe do a little bit more. Notice what it's doing right now. It's going to slowly ramping up, doing this modulation by some amount, and the amount is going to be, how much we do is going to be the shape mod nth. So it is slowly rising to this value. And of course, it's kind of a slow. Let me just go to the next one. There we go, super slow. Now, of course, at some point, it's going to go back. And at this, what we are doing right now is just going back very aggressively. So if we go to the next one, it's going to be the decay, just like this one. So right now we are doing something like this and something like this. So maybe we want some decay, right? So we can use it. And for now, I'm just going to keep that one to nothing. And we are going to be doing something. And I'm going to go maybe right there and do some value. So now it's going to take some time to go up, and we can see it right there on the spectrum that is going up, and at some point it needs to go down, and it goes down now in a more smooth way because we have a decay. So yeah, we have an envelope, dedicated envelope to address the phase modulation. Okay, so I'm going to stop right now. Now, the only thing that you need to remember if you don't know how phase modulation works is that you have a modulator, you have a carrier, which is the one you see right here. The one behind the scenes is going to be the modulator, right? And of course, you have an envelope that you can control. You can do something called ratio, and you have the intensity of how much modulation you're going to be doing there, how much phase modulation you're going to be doing. So if you don't understand this is like the base for synthesis in terms of phase modulation, which is sometimes called FM modulation. For example, the DX7 or, any other synthesizer that does FM or in this case, phase modulation. So if you don't know how it works, it's kind of hard to understand what is happening behind the scenes. And I get it. It's just, it's a little bit hard because you kind of need to learn something before you can really know how to control this. Now, for now, I'm going to be showing you that all the other oscillators, you can, of course, do this modulation. And of course, I went to a default patch. Let me go right there and right there. Now we're going through the multi-engine. You have this modulation, but not all oscillators will do the same thing. For example, the sign number 2, if I go up, notice it's way different. So the phase modulation is different because the modulator changes. And the other waveforms are just going to be the same thing. The modulator is going to change by something, and the modulation is just going to be different. Right? And the effect is going to be different. The sound is going to be different. Now, at the end of the day, we are still doing phase modulation, and we are doing it with the most common waveforms. Now, the other ones are just different things. They're just different ways, different sounds. Notice that how this sounds. We can still, do the modulation, but the source sound, it sounds kind of weird, right? So some of these oscillators are just way specific, like the fat one or the air, which is just like this. When we go up, we get something like that. It sounds like when you lose on the Call of Duty, and then you go to the air 2, and again, you have different sounds. But they're all doing, at the end of the day, some kind of a phase modulation. Now, again, if you don't know how it works, I'm going to take you to the DAW, and I'm going to teach you how phase modulation works behind the scenes, so you can understand how it works in theory, and then you will understand how it's working behind the scenes right here. Okay, so in this part, we're going to learn a little bit more about phase modulation and how it works behind the scenes, because maybe, ratios and carriers and modulators and envelopes, it's just a little bit confusing, and it's because you need to kind of learn this before you can understand what's going on your Minilogue. And of course, recording this in post, so maybe my voice is a little bit better because, it took me a long time to record the video. So now my voice is kind of arrested, but that's fine. Okay, so right now I'm taking you to the grid. This is inside Bitwig, which is a DAW, where you have a section or maybe a plugin, let's call it a plugin, where you can build your own synthesizer. You have a lot of different modules, and it's modular synthesis. So you have a lot of different modules you can bring, and you can build whatever whatever you want. So, okay, so right now we have an envelope, and then it's going out, and this one, it's the oscillator. It's an oscillator. So if I play something, right? We get it. Pretty simple. So, of course, let's pretend that this is going to be our Minilogue. So this one, this sine wave, this is going to be the multi-engine. And I'm going to kind of rename it. So this is going to be the ME, for the multi-engine. So remember, we have a hidden kind of an oscillator working behind the scenes that we cannot see on the multi-engine. In this case, I'm going to give you the example that we have with the synth 1. So we know that we have another oscillator, another sound source modulating this one. And we talked about carriers and modulators. So the one that you cannot see that will do the modulation to this one is going to be called modulator. And this one is going to be called carrier. So I'm just going to kind of call them, accordingly. Okay, so now we have a carrier and we have a modulator. Now, of course, sometimes it's super important that we can see what that we can do. So on Bitwig, you can bring an oscilloscope and connect it right there, and you're going to be able to see what you're doing. And in this case, we are just, getting a sine wave. So every time that we play something, we see the sine wave right there. Okay. So at this point, we are doing no phase modulation. We are just doing nothing. So how phase modulation works? So, well, we have the modulator and the phase of this one, and for now, I'm just going to maybe change it to something else. The phase of this one, notice that it's just going to be a little bit offset, and it's how it works on Bitwig. This is going to start modulating whatever we do on the carrier. So if I go and bring it right here, and to this position, this connection is going to be the phase modulation. And for now, I'm just going to go and disconnect it. So this one is going to start providing an instruction with its phase into, how we can modulate the carrier. And as we do more, this one is going to start changing and changing and changing and changing. And is that how it looks? It looks like, what we have on our Minilogue. Now, again, we can kind of see this. If I go up there, notice how it's going to start changing. Now, if I do retrigger, let me just do something like that. Both are going to be on the same spot, which is kind of something that you don't get on an analog or maybe on a normal synthesizer. In this case, I'm retriggering both oscillators, so I can show you the difference. So I'm going to be playing something. I'm going to maybe just do it right there. And I'm going to start doing that phase modulation. Now, both oscillators, the phase is aligned. Now, when I start moving or doing this modulation, this one is going to start kind of shifting the red one, which is, the syn 1, our carrier. And notice that we have a pattern right here. It's not going randomly. So as soon as we go more, notice that it starts to fold and starts to fold. And at some point, it's going to get at this point when it hits right here. And if we keep going up, the same one is going to keep folding and it keep folding. But notice that we do have a pattern. It's not something that happens randomly. So depends on who is modulating, depends how, the sound is going to be. So if I start folding this one, since we are changing this instruction, now this one is going to start to change. And if I change the maybe something else, notice I'm going to flip this, notice that the modulation changes. So if the modulator changes, the sound of the carrier is going to change. That's how it works with phase modulation. Now, if I maybe go right there, notice that maybe, let me go to the keyboard. So now we are just not doing anything. I'm just going to stride the sine wave. And if I, let me just remove that. So I'm right now on the stride sine wave. I'm playing a C. And as I go up, we can hear that the sound is going to, of course, start changing. Now it sounds like our Minilogue. So this is what is going on behind the scenes. We are doing that phase modulation with the modulator. And the modulator is instructing how that should happen. And as we do more, of course, we get more. Okay, so we know this, we got this, now we know what the modulator is. It's just a waveform doing something, some phase modulation. But we also know that when we do shift and we move the knob, the shape knob, we are going to be kind of messing with the ratio. So the ratio, in this case, on this place, on Bitwig, right here, each oscillator can work with ratios. Right now, what ratio is going to do, if I play something, notice that it's going to be changing. All right, so if you guess what is going on, this is just kind of going an octave higher. Now, the thing is that the ratios work on a little bit different. Right, so we're going to go bring this module. This module, what it will do, it will kind of let us see what is going on with ratios. So this one is going to get an incoming signal from the keyboard. And then right here on this one, we can see what we are going to be getting out at the end. Right, so if I go to my keyboard and I play a C note, notice that this is changing and just kind of giving me or telling me which key I'm pressing. So this one is the numerator and this one is the denominator. And I'm just kind of giving you a tiny explanation of how ratio works. So, and it's not like a range or octave control. It just works in a different way. So the ratio, this one is going to be, the first one, the numerator, is going to be like the multiply. And the other one is going to be the divide. So when we hit a key, that's going to be working on a certain frequency. If I play C3, it's going to be 262 hertz. That's the frequency I'm playing. So again, behind the scenes, this is going to be translated to a key, right? That's, how we use this. So this number is going to be this key. So ratio, what it will do, it will take this value, 262, and it will multiply it for whatever value you have right here. And then this one is going to be dividing it. So at the end of the day, this is not an octave control. So if I play something, notice that one is going to be a C3. And we are on 1-1, so it means that we are not changing anything. But as soon as you go up to the 2, you're going to be doing a C4, and this is what's going on right here. Now, if I go to the 3, notice that something changes. It's not an octave higher. It's going to be a G4. And remember what it does. This is going to multiply whatever frequency you're playing. So sometimes it's just going to be going to a different place. And in this case, 3 to 1 is going to be a G4. And if you think about this, G, if I'm pressing a C, G is going to be the 5th. So if we keep going up, at some point, we're going to go back to C, and then we are going to get different, to different places. We get a third, and so on, and so on, and so on. So remember, this one is going to be the divide. Now, we don't have these controls on the Minilogue, but I'm just kind of explaining whatever, this tutorial, this guide is just super long already, so it doesn't matter. So of course, since right now, let's say that we start on 262 and we multiply by 2, is of course 523. Let me move it right there. So this divide, what it will do, it will just divide by this value by whatever value we have right here. So at the end of the day, if you divide, you're going to be going back to 262. So you're back to C3. So this is how the ratio works. If I go to 4, we're going to be multiplying whatever key we press, and then it's going to be dividing it by 2. And if we do it by 3, notice that we get something else, right? We get an F. So this is how the ratio works. Now, of course, on the Minilogue, we don't have something like this. We just have one control that will kind of change the ratio. Now, at the end of the day, what we need to learn right now is that whenever we change the ratio, we are changing the pitch of the modulator. And the modulator, remember, if it changes, it's going to change what the phase modulation will be. So if I do a little bit of phase modulation, but I start moving the ratios, notice that the instruction is going to start changing. And if I even go to lowers, it is going to change. And the lesson is that everything that you do on the modulator will affect the carrier and how it sounds, of course. So we do get the ratio, right? That's something that we get on the Minilogue. But we also, we also have this, this envelope, this shape int that we can use. So this is just an envelope. Now, remember, I'm going to go right here to envelopes. And on the Minilogue, we have an AD, right? That's what we can do on the Minilogue. So instead of going directly right here to the phase mod, and again, it's kind of behind the scenes on the Minilogue is just a little bit different, but at the end, we get pretty much the same result. So instead of going directly and modulating, doing this phase modulation directly, why not going through an envelope? So this envelope is going to be doing something to the sound of the modulator, and that sound that comes out is the one that will do the modulation. So right now, of course, since we are doing nothing, we just get pretty much the same thing, right? And we are doing something with this one. So if I start doing phase modulation, now the sound goes through an envelope. So this envelope, notice that what's going on right now. We get something different. We don't get a constant kind of a modulation. And it's because the envelope is kind of controlling the out that we get right here. If I go to something slower, the modulation is going to be way different. Now we can do something like this on the Minilogue. Of course, it's going to be hidden on the settings menu. It's just kind of a little bit kind of annoying to change, but you get it. You can control an envelope, create an envelope, and control how much or how this is going to be. So another thing that you get, and again, this is going to be hidden on the main menu on the settings of the multi-engine. You could do feedback, and this is something very common with phase modulation or FM synthesis. It's something very common. So this modulator is going to feedback itself, and at the end of the day, you're going to be getting a different kind of a sound. On Bitwig, we could maybe say let's do something like that and connect it right there, and this is going to be kind of a feedback into itself. And we're going to get a different sound. Well, this is not the way it works in Bitwig. On Bitwig, we kind of need to bring a delay and then go through the delay. And we're going to go to very short times. And then I'm going to be doing that kind of a phase modulation. I'm going to go to almost nothing. And then I'm going to go here. And again, this is just a pretty dumb example. And what I want to show you is that when we do this, we're going to be altering the sound of the modulator. And remember, if the sound of the modulator changes, the phase modulation to the carrier is just going to change. So if at some point I'm going to go up on this one, notice how this is just changing. Right? And we're going very aggressively. Now, there are very better ways to do this, but yeah, that's what you get. So we can go really up on this one. And we are going to go into that territory. So right, so you can do this. Of course, we can do better thing, but in this case, you have a control to do feedback on your Minilogue. Of course, on the Minilogue, the oscillators, the multi-engine different oscillators that we get on the second one at least, not on the user one. Those ones are different. I'm going to be talking about that one on the next video. Are kind of a I want to say pre-wired. They're kind of a pre-programmed. So they do very specific things. They don't start on a clean kind of a thing like this. They might be, different oscillators, maybe a wavetable, not in this case wavetable, but maybe it could be a sub behind the scenes, or maybe a saw, and that saw is going to be kind of a, going to a different ratio, or maybe it's going to be something like that. And of course, the instruction is going to change. And this is something that it's kind of a pre-programmed on that oscillator because it's digital. So you cannot change it. You can change only some of the parameters. And that's, that's how it works. So if you really like all of this stuff, this kind of all the sounds that you can get and all the possibilities, the envelopes, the modulators, and all of this, you need to take a look at the Arp 6. You even get a plugin right now that you can download and maybe just learn it, and then maybe if you like it, you can buy the synthesizer. I've got it, and I'm gonna do a guide about that one. This synthesizer is just a fantastic synthesizer. So now, since you understand what the modulator, what the carrier is, what we can do, why we can use an envelope, why we can feedback it and do all of these things, now you understand a little bit more about your Minilogue, your multi-engine. Right, so let's just continue because, I want to show you a couple more things that you have on the settings of the multi-engine. Now, just like I told before, all the different oscillators, they have their own unique way of working. Like the sine wave 2, it has a self-feedback. And when we go up, it's just going to sound very differently from the other one. Right? So all of them, they do something else behind the scenes, something extra. And you cannot change it. It's just, and you cannot change this. It's just it's programmed like this behind the scenes. Now, if you want to know what they do, what the 17 oscillators will do right now, the 17 different types, you need to go to the manual. I'm not going to go through all of them because this is just going to take us a long time. And if you go to the manual, and I'm even going to tell you and show you right here, the page number 19 in the manual, at least in English, is going to give you a section where it's going to be detailing you, or giving you a detail of the variable phase modulation, BPM, and it's giving you a chart just showing you how everything works behind the scenes, right? And if you go right there at the bottom, it's going to tell you the sine 1 is a basic oscillator using a sine wave for both carrier and modulator. So you get the information for all the different waveforms. And notice that these ones are going to be doing something far more specific, and the other ones are just going to be doing something else. So they all do some different things, and to really know for sure what they do, if you really are, that geeky and you want to know, you can go to the manual in just page 19 and you can find what they do. Now, the manual gives you some very cool information. It's not the best manual I've ever, read in my life, but, it gives you some very cool tips, let's say. So, okay, so let's go back. So let me just start doing a default patch. Let me do something like that. And I'm going to maybe go all the way up on the mixer on the oscillator number 1 and all the way up on the multi-engine. And I'm going to be going to the sine wave, just like that, right? So we have the oscillator number 1 and we have the sine wave of the oscillator number 2. For now, I'm going to go maybe down on the number 1. We are just getting the sine wave on the multi-engine. So you have some other cool tricks that you can do on this one. If you go to the edit mode and you go to the number 10, we know that we have the multi-engine kind of controls, the feedback, the noise, the envelope, and everything we already discussed. But if I go right here to the previous one, it's going to tell you other settings, and you have two more settings for your multi-engine. So right now, notice that we don't have a range control for the multi-engine, which is we don't. So this is going to be 1. It's going to be 4, 2, 8, or 16. Right, and I'm pressing a key. Right, so pretty simple. You can just go and change the ranges from there. Then you have another cool feature, and that's why I'm bringing the oscillator number 1. You have the multi-routing, and it's going to be pre-BCF or post-BCF. And so this one, what it means, let me give you an example. I'm going to go all the way down, all the way up on the mixer. So now we are doing multi-engine, and maybe just not that much, maybe a little bit, of the oscillator number 1. Right, so we get that sound. So I'm going to be cutting some frequencies. I'm going to go there and just cut frequencies. And if I play something, we hear nothing, almost nothing, because we are cutting a lot. Maybe I'm going to go there. And it makes sense. We are cutting a lot of frequencies. But right here, what we can do, we can change it to post BCF. Because now the multi-engine is skipping the filter. That's why it's post BCF. It's just, not going through the filter, and it's going directly out to the envelope. But the oscillator number 1, this one, cannot skip the filter. So when I press something, notice that we are getting the sine wave. And if I do a filter, we are going to be getting a little bit more of that saw of that oscillator number 1. But yeah, that's what pretty much you're doing. You're just going and kind of skipping the filter section with the multi-engine. Right, so let me show you something else. I want to say forgot, and I'm gonna go back to a default patch, and I'm gonna just have the sine wave that we've been using because it's very easy to hear. And I'm going to go to the program edit and I'm going to go to the number 10, where we have the multi-engine controls. So we have the feedback, we already know that one. Noise depth, we know. Shape, mod, int, we know. Attack, we know. Attack, the decay, we know. But then we have the mod key track. What the F is this? So this one, it works kind of like the key track. And I'm doing some kind of a shape right now. I'm going to do it. We are going to be getting, some modulation, some phase modulation, right? And we get it. Now, the key track right now is just not doing anything. For all the keys, whatever value you're doing right here is going to be applied the same to all the keys. It doesn't matter if you play high keys or you play low keys. Now, this one is going to be changing how that behaves. As you go up, if you go to higher values, now this one, and I'm going to absurds right now, what this is going to do is that the higher keys will not be affected by its shape. Notice that I'm getting a sine wave. And I just get a sine wave, and I don't get any of the modulation that we have right there. But if I go to lower keys, we start getting that. And if I go one octave down, I get it kind of a completely. And if I keep going down, I get much more. Now, if you go towards, of course, remember, if you go towards 0, all the keys are going to be getting the same. And if I go all the other way, it's just going to be a little bit different. It's like all the higher keys are going to get much more, and the lower keys are going to get a little bit less. That's how it works. But this one, again, works like this key track, but instead of working with the cutoff, it's just going to work with the shape. So if I go to a new patch, and I'm going to go right there, select the multi-engine, go down in the mixer, and go up on that one. We have the sine wave. We are in the same spot. But if I go to the upper one, is going to say user. Now, we kind of know everything about the multi-engine. We have different modes. The middle one is the one we've been learning, but then you have two other modes, which is going to be the first one is the user multi-engine. So what you can do, you can upload to the synth user waveforms. Usually you buy them from developers, and some of them are really expensive, like way too expensive. And some other ones are just going to be a little bit cheaper, and you have some free ones. I'm going to be maybe on the next video kind of showing you how to upload or how to put them on the synth, because they're really useful, and you have some very cool waveforms that you cannot get with the multi-engine, the normal multi-engine, the one you get from factory. And the other one is going to be the noise. Now, for the noise, you have different profiles. You get this one, which is white noise, but notice it says high. So this means that when you move this control, and notice it says cutoff. So what you can do, you can cut the high frequencies by some amount. So the white noise is not so kind of aggressive, let's say. So you're cutting high frequencies. All right, so makes sense. So if you go to the other one says slow. So if I play something, notice that it sounds super low. And it's because now this control all the way down, you're cutting low frequencies. And as you move up, you're going to be cutting less frequencies until you get to the same white noise. That's why it's high and low. You do a high pass or you do a low pass. There's no magic right here. Now, if you go to the next one is going to be peak. So what peak is a bandpass. And if I go right there, of course, you're going to get more on that one because you're going to go up on that peak. And if you go down, you're just going to get much less. Now, the next one is going to be the decimator. And I'm going to make sure that I'm all the way down. So this one, notice, it sounds super crushed. And yeah, it's because it's using a decimator. Now, as you go up, notice that this still sounds like noise. So what we do with the shape, we pretty much go down on the sample rate. So it's going to be all the way down on the sample rate. And as we go up, of course, we gain more definition, but we are still using a noise, as a sound source. The only thing is that we are using that decimator. You're just messing with the sample rate. All right, so that was a lot. So if you watch all of this and you learned something, congratulations, you earned a star, because now you know phase modulation. If you didn't, or if you did, now you know how the multi-engine works and all the things that you can do. You have a world to explore on the multi-engine. So take your time. It's going to take you some time. It took me some while, a little bit of time, just to see how can I use the multi-engine to combine it with the other ones to get different sounds and different textures. And it works really great. You can get a million amount of sounds combining the multi-engine with the 1 and the 2. Okay, so now we are going to be talking about effects. So we need to talk about this section and make sure you are on a default patch. Right, so we are in a default patch. Okay, so you have 3 main categories. You have modulation, you have reverb, and you have delay. So if you're asking what modulation means, it's going to be chorus, it's going to be flanger, it's going to be phaser. Now, of course, how do you use it? So right now we are not doing anything, and this knob right here, this switch, is going to be the one that is going to be turning it on. Right now it's off. And so if I go all the way to off, it's going to be off. But if I go to on, the reverb is on. And we can hear that it's doing that effect, right? It's all the way on. So of course, if you want to turn it off, you just go off and that's it. If you want to go to the modulation, you turn it on and now you're going to have your modulation on. You go to the reverb, you turn it on and now you have modulation on and reverb. If you go to delay and you turn it on, you have all 3. Right? So you have all the 3 on the chain. Now, with each category, you have a very specific different things. And sometimes this control will mean a different thing. They will do a different thing on modulation or reverb or delay. And even this switch is going to change a little bit. So let's start with the modulations. Of course, we are not going to go through all the modulations, but I'm just going to show you how this works. So when you're in modulation, by going to the select, you're going to be selecting the different categories that you have for your modulation. And there's at some point when I start kind of cycling through the different effects, you're going to reach to something that shows a star. Star means that the chorus is the first option. And again, it's obvious because you're looping the whole effects. So it's telling you you're back to the beginning, and then back to the beginning. Right, so each different effect, of course, ensemble or phaser, are going to give you a different vibe. Now, I'm gonna give you a tiny trick. So with all the different effects, and for now I'm gonna go to chorus. All the different effects built in, they have kind of a profiles that you can change. If you hold the shift and then you go to the select and you go up, it's gonna change the type of the effect. So now the chorus is gonna be a light chorus, or it can be a deep chorus, or triphase, or harmonic, or mono, or feedback, and then vibrato. So you have a lot of things. And then you go back to stereo, which is the default. And they will all kind of sound a little bit different. And right now I'm doing off on and everything. I'm just going to go just to the modulation. So we just can get a chorus. And that's going to be that one. If I go the other one, let me just go to the feedback. And it's just going to sound very different. And you, of course, let me go there. I'm going to have to turn it on. I'm going to go there. There we go. Ensemble. If you go to the next one is going to have different kind of profiles, light, mono, and stereo. We don't have the other ones. And if you remember on the chorus one, we have a lot of options. And this depends on which effect you are selecting. If you go to the ensemble again, you have all 3, light, mono, and stereo. But if you go to the phaser, you can have fast, orange, small, resonant, black, and then, a few more options. And all of them will just, give you different sounds. Same with the other one, with the flanger. If I go to that one, it's going to be a little bit different. Now, of course, it's going to be up to you to explore all the different sounds because they all sound a little bit different. And this is something that you get on the modulation section, just on the modulation. You don't get it on the reverb and you don't get it on the delay. So then, of course, on the reverb, you can do the same thing. And for now, I'm just going to turn off this one. And I'm going to go back to the reverb and I'm going to turn it on, right? So by default, the default one is going to be, not that one, is going to be, let me just find it. It's going to be the hull. This is the default one. But again, by going to the select, you can select different types like smooth, arena, and they, again, all sound very different. Right, that's the large one, and you have the riser. Right, so again, it's completely up to you to explore the different sounds. And again, like I've told you before, on this one, you cannot go shift and go up and just change the type. It just will not do anything. It's just doing and going through the different types that you have available. Now, if you go to the delays, when you go to the select, you can have different options. So first, you can have your mono, delay, ping pong, and then high pass, and then tape, and one tap, and then stereo. And notice that it says stereo. So I'm going to go all the way up. And at some point, they're going to be hitting my star, which is going to be the first one, stereo. That's the default one. So what you get, it's, of course, different types of delays. And at some point, you're going to start getting the same delays, and then it says BPM. And it's because those ones are going to be tied to the tempo of your, of the unit, or they're going to be tied to whatever is that your unit you're using to sync the synthesizer, maybe the DAW or maybe a different synthesizer. So when you go up in time, in the case of the delays, you're going to be working with subdivisions because you're doing BPM. If you're not doing BPM, let me go back to the delay. We go there. If you're not, let me just use that one. You're going to be going in milliseconds, which is of course a little bit different. So when you're in chorus, the time, it's going to be the speed of whatever is that you're using. In this case, it's going to be the speed of this ensemble or phaser or flanger or course. And when I mean speed, I mean the rate. Notice that it goes much faster and it's much slower. Right. And in the case of the depth, it's going to be, of course, how much of this effect you're going to be doing. And it's like a blend control. And in the case, again, of modulation, it's going to be depth. The label for this one is kind of a correct. And time, it's correct as well. But yeah, it depends on where you go. You're going to be going faster or changing the depth. Now, if you go to the reverb one, it's going to be a little bit different. So the time is going to be pretty much like your dispersion, amount of dispersion or decay, for example. And the delay will increase whatever you're doing right here. So for now, I'm going to make sure that the mod is off, and I'm going to go to reverb and make sure that this one is on. And if I play something, right, we have that hall, I guess. Let me just go to hall, maybe. Right, so if I go up, notice that it's just a little bit longer. And now the depth is going to increase whatever we are doing, so it's going to be much more noticeable. If I go all the way down to the depth, we get much nothing, right? Because we are doing nothing. So you can use this kind of an intensity or, again, depth control. And in the case, again, of the delay, I'm going to make sure the reverb is off and go to the delay and turn it on. This one is going to be, again, the amount of milliseconds, the time. And this one, again, is going to be the feedback in this case. If I go all the way up, you're going to start self-feedbacking just like you do on a delay. Okay, so let me just go to the reverb, making sure that it's off. This one is off. And I'm going to be maybe creating an example with a delay. And I'm going to go maybe, I don't know, whatever, ping pong. All right, so ping pong. So if I do something, of course, now we know that with this one, we can control the time. Maybe that is fine. And then you get the depth control is going to be the amount of feedback that we are doing. Now, notice that you don't have a dry and wet control. So you cannot choose how much of your dry signal it's going to go out, and you cannot decide how much of your wet signal is going to be affecting the overall sound. So you don't have a mix control. You don't have it, but yeah, you do. It's hidden. If you go to shift and you keep holding shift, if you release it, you're going to lose it. So you need to hold and press and hold. And now the depth control is going to be like a blend. Notice it says delay mixed wet. So yeah, that's the dry and wet control. So if I go all the way up, it's going to say dry 0%. So if I play something, notice I'm only getting the delay, and it's not, the video is not on, it's not offset. So if I press a key, I'm not hearing that key. The only thing I'm hearing is the delay because I'm going to mix 100%. So we are just getting the delay. Now, if I go and shift and do a little bit less, maybe I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to be listening more of my keys and less of the delay. So this control, the shift and the depth to turn it into a mix control, works for the delay, works for the reverb, and it has no effect on the mod. Because the depth, it's already kind of a blend control, kind of a mix control. Okay, so now we are going to start in a default patch 450, for example. So now we know pretty much the whole synthesizer. We know how the VCOs, how the mixer, how, we can use these controls, how to use the envelopes, the LFOs, and how to use the effects, how to use the multi-engine and all the internal configuration that we can do. So we know pretty much the whole synth. Now, minus, of course, the sequencer. I'm going to do it on the next one. But now we need to talk about the small, tiny things that you can do behind the scenes on the configuration. So, for example, if I go to the edit mode, notice that you get the program edit and you get the sequence edit. So I'm going to go first to the program edit. We know some of them already. So I'm going to go to the first one on the program edit. So the first thing that you're going to be getting is going to be the joystick. So by default, and again, I'm on a default patch, what you can do, you can just bend up or you can go to the X-axis and bend down, right? Pretty cool. Now, if you go up on this one, what you can do, you're doing vibrato. And if you go down, you're doing cutting. You're using the cut-off filter. You're just cutting filters, cutting frequencies, right? You're modulating this control. Now, of course, this is assignable. So the first option is going to be for that. So it's going to be X plus. So it means when you do X and you move to the right, that's going to be X plus. What is going to be your range? 2 notes, more notes, 4 notes, 12 notes. So now if I go to 12, it's going to be much higher, right? So this is where you change all that information. If you go to the next one, you're going to be X minus, which is going to be, of course, the other side. Go to the left. So that's going to be the X minus. Now, the other ones are really interesting because you can assign whatever you do to the X plus or the X minus. Now, by default, remember, is going to be a little bit of vibrato. So what it's doing, it's going to be on pitch. By default, right now, I'm on pitch. But if I wanted to change it, I go right here, and we are doing a modulation to the cut-off filter. And it's because the X plus, which means when we go Y, and we go up, it means that we are doing the LFO intensity. We are rising this volume, right? This control. We are just going up on that intensity. So, of course, you can change this. Maybe what I want to do, I want to use something else. And notice all the options that you get. You can select a million things right here. Now, for example, let's do something obvious. Let's say I want to go to the VCO shape. So if I go that, and I go up on that one, I'm changing the shape of the LFO. I'm sorry, the shape of the oscillator number 1. Now then, if I go to the next option, is going to be how much you're going to be modulating or changing that shape, right? And by default, it's 20%, but you can go really aggressive right here. Right? So pretty simple and understandable. Then you have the other side, which is going to be the Y minus. What is going to happen when you go down? And by default, it's cutoff. But you can do the same thing with the Y plus. You can go to all the different sources, and then you go to the next one, and you can decide the intensity of how much you're going to be going down. And right now, it's super aggressive. So, yeah, you can do something a little bit less. Okay, so we are going to be talking, and I'm going to be exiting, and I'm going to go out, and I'm going to go down, back to the 450. So now we need to talk about the globals. And I mean this globals, the global edit. So the global edits are going to be the global for all the synthesizer. So this will apply to the whole synth, to all the patches, to everything that you do. So some of the options that you get right here are pretty much self-explanatory. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to show you the most important ones. I'm going to go to the first one. So the first one is going to be the master tune, right? Self-explanatory. So this is going to be shifting your master, whatever your synthesizer is going to be shifting the tune by some amount of cents, or, you can go into negatives. Again, it's just like a global detune. And you can go to the other one, and the other one is going to be transpose. But of course, this one is going to be by semitones. So if I play something and I go -1, 2, notice it's transposing. So it's a global transpose. So if I go to the second one, this one is going to be some other options. The first one is going to be the metronome. So you get a metronome Of course, the question is when you get a metronome. So if I turn it on, right now it's off by default, you get a metronome when you record on your sequence. So if you do play, nothing is going to happen. So when I do rec and then play and rec, notice that I get a metronome. So yeah, that's what it is. So of course you can have it on or you can have it off. In this case, I'm just going to turn it off. Now the next options, of course, you can connect at the back a damper pedal, and this is going to be the configuration for it. And the next one is going to be the local software. So if you're connecting this to an external source, like maybe your DAW or something like that, sometimes the local SW is going to mess with that connection that you have on your DAW, for example. So sometimes this keyboard's going to get triggered. So if you're working with a different MIDI keyboard, you're going to start getting into maybe kind of getting a duplicated sound. It's going to sound like a little bit weird. And this is an option that you get on pretty much any synthesizer that you can connect to your computer and use it like that. So if you have you connect it to your DAW, for example, and you're getting kind of a double trigger, or maybe you're getting a kind of a weird sound, it doesn't sound that good, you need to turn off the local SW. This is going to avoid the synth from kind of a re-triggering again when you're using different tracks or using different things, or maybe a MIDI controller. So yeah, right now, since I am using it and I'm using it a different MIDI keyboard and I'm using the DAW to record this, it's completely off and I need it like that. So then I'm going to go to the next one, and this one is super important. It's going to be the velocity curve. So right now I cannot show you because again, everything's kind of connected and I'm using external source. So I'm not controlling it with the synth, but this is what it means. It's going to be selecting, or you can select different profiles for the velocity of the keyboard. So 127, which is the last one when you go all the way up, it means that when you press a key, the velocity is going to be all the way up. It's constant, 127, full velocity. It doesn't matter if you press slower or maybe softer, or you press harder. It doesn't matter. So it's going to be always the same velocity. Now then, as you go down, you have different profiles. It's going to be a little bit, less. You're going to get, of course, still, if you press soft, it's going to be softer. If you press harder, it's going to be harder. And as you keep going down, everything is going to be a little bit kind of I wouldn't say too excessive, but this would mean in the type number 1, you really need to press your keys really hard in order to hear something. And yeah, that's the kind of the profile. So you have all different profiles. All of this is on the documentation, and depends on what you want to do. In my case, I like to use the type 8, or the maybe 27. And again, depends on what you want to do and your preference in terms of velocity. So you can select up to 8 profiles, and then you have the constant. Next one is going to be the knob mode. So this one is really cool. By default, from factory, it means that it's off. So let me just give you an example. I'm going to go out and back in. So right now, this is going to be the default patch. I'm going to be making some changes, and I'm going to go right here, and that's going to be my patch. I'm going to write this one. So now this was stored in memory. So this is my patch, right? The cutoff all the way down. I'm going to go out, and I'm going to go all the way up on the cutoff. And I'm going to go back to the patch I saved. Now remember, behind the scenes, the patch has the cutoff all the way down. So if I play it, it's going to be very silent. So the jump mode, it means that as soon as you move this knob, it's going to adjust whatever value you have for that one to whatever you're doing right here. That's the jump mode. So you have the other mode, which is going to be let me go right here, is going to be the catch mode. So the catch mode, it's a little bit different. I'm going to go and just, keep the catch mode. I'm going to maybe go and do it like that. I'm going to save that. So now the patch, the configuration is going to be the cutoff all the way kind of up, it's very right. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do the same thing I did before, but the opposite. I'm going to go all the way down. So now my cutoff is kind of all the way down, right? And I'm going to go up to my patch. And remember, the cutoff is all the way up. Now, if I move this cutoff, notice it's not doing anything. It's not doing the same thing that the jump is doing. So with the other mode, the catch, it means that I need to go up and catch the default value. And once I catch the value that is in store, I can, of course, make the changes. But you need to kind of go to whatever is on memory, on that saved on that patch, and then you can change it. So then you have the other mode. And to be honest, the other mode, let me go there, is going to be scale. So on the manual, it says that the scale mode will increase or decrease the value in a relative kind of a fashion. But in theory, you know, it moves relative to whatever value you have from before. That's what it says. Now, I couldn't get it to work. I really don't understand it. I couldn't kind of create a good example just to show you right here. So if there's something I just don't understand or I cannot get it to work, I just much prefer to leave it blank. So the default is going to be jump, and that is my favorite. So I'm going to be leaving it right there. If I go to global 4, which is going to be the next one, right now this one is important. It's going to be how you're going to be triggering this one, how you're going to be working with this one, and in terms of MIDI. So you can do USB and MIDI at the same time, but you can maybe just change it to USB, and that's it. It's USB MIDI. Now, if you're using MIDI, it's going to kind of use MIDI by default. But it's still USB, but it's mostly MIDI. But you can just only use USB without using MIDI. So, you know, that's that option. And then, of course, you can select your MIDI channel. You can select your clock source. And we already kind of talked about this. So you can select the internal clock source or maybe something that it's outside. Like, for example, the DAW. So here's where you check your clock source. And then you get your RX and you polychaining and everything else. And the next option is going to be, again, the RX for the program change and all of that. That if you really like to mess with this, this is where you're going to be doing it. Now, the next option is going to be the parameter display. We kind of already talked about this, you know, the trick that we talked earlier. And then you have the brightness of this one. You can go really bright or, you know, not that bright. You have an auto power feature, and I believe the threshold for this one is going to be like 4 hours. So if you go to sleep and you leave it on, this is something that you should not be doing. So this, of course, is going to detect that you're not doing anything on the synthesizer, and it's just going to turn it off after a few hours, which is something super great. And the other options are going to be the oscilloscope. You can enable or disable it. And then you have something that calls shift functions. So this is something that we need to discuss. And notice that you get favorites and you get active steps. So now I'm going to go to favorites because we're going to be using it. But when you go to active step, this one is going to work with the sequencer. We're going to talk about that on the next video. Right now, the shift function, I'm going to be changing it to favorite. And then on this options, you have your user scales. I'm not going to be covering this because it's super extensive, but you can of course use your scales on the keyboard and just use them right here and store them. And maybe I'm going to be talking about this on the next video, but it's pretty boring. And of course you have your dump right here, all dump. So you can dump the whole synth, like all the things that you have inside, all the programs, you can just dump it to, to something else, or your computer or your local drive or whatever it is that you're connecting it. But you can still do it from the librarian, right? That's just a better way to do this. Okay, so the next thing, it's going to be saving patches, and we are reaching the end. So how do you save a patch? I know that we are kind of at the end of this video and you already know all the synthesizer and you don't know how to save patches. I'm pretty sure you know, but maybe you skipped all the sections because you want to know how to save patches. This is pretty simple, and at the same time is a little bit, how's that word? Annoying. It's just a little bit annoying. And this is something that you don't get with the other synthesizers, the Op6, the Web State, the ModWave. It's just a much easier kind of a way to save patches. So let's say I'm gonna go let's go to the 451. That's gonna be my patch. So I'm gonna make some changes right here. I'm maybe gonna go up on the oscillator number 2, so I can, we have something. So we have something like that. So this is gonna be my patch. Again, let's pretend that it sounds good. So I want to save it. What you need to do, you need to go to write. When you go to write, it's gonna ask you where you want to put it. Now, remember how this works. When you are working and creating a patch, you're working on a local, kind of a temporary or temporal memory, right? So you're not writing it to the disk, to the synthesizer. So when you want to save it, it's going to ask you, okay, so we have this temporal thing that you did on the synthesizer. I'm asking you, where do you want to change? Where do you want to save it? On the 451, which is where you are right now, or you want to store it on a different one? So you can, of course, select a different location because maybe you don't want to modify the 451. So you can select a different location. In this case, I want to store it on the same one, so I'm going to press right, and that's it. Now, notice it's just kind of not asking you if you want to rename it. It's just saving it. Now, to rename it, you're going to need to go to Program Edit, and right here, notice that you have a blank kind of a space right there. This one is going to be the program name. So right here, you're going to be doing all the, moving, scrolling the program value just to get it to, just to adjust the name. And right here, I couldn't find any shortcut. On the other synthesizers from KORG, you do have some kind of a shortcut where you can select Shift and then move this knob, and you can go to the different kind of categories. Right here, you can go to blank or maybe uppercase. Then you have lowercase and then numbers. So you can go maybe to Shift and jump on different categories or the different kind of types. On this one, I just couldn't find a way of doing that, which is a bit annoying, because this means that whatever you want to do right here, you need to scroll the whole time. It is just annoying. That's it. That's how it works. To go to the next one, you're going to need to go to the next one and, and just do whatever is that you need to do, just to go and change whatever values. And at the same time, if you want to delete something, you need to go all the way down and just, and you need to do the work on this one. The saving, it's not that good. Now, this is my opinion, of course. So I'm going to do whatever. It doesn't matter. Now, again, on other synthesizers, on the OP6 and on the Wave State, it's really easy. It's really easy to save patches, but not on this one. So that's why it's cool maybe having an external software. The Sunny Synth one, the software I told you about before, you can kind of save patches on the go, and you can kind of rename it on your computer or your keyboard. So you don't need to do all of this nonsense. So great. So I'm going to be writing this one. I want to write it to the 451. That's fine. That's it. So that's how you save a patch. Okay, so the last thing we need to cover is about favorites. How can we store favorites? And you can store up to 16 favorites. Now, why? If you're asking why 16, it's because you store them on each step, and you can access them when you tap on a step. Right? That's how it works. And since you have 16 steps, you have 16 favorites, right? That's the way it works. So how can you store favorites? Okay, so let's say that this one, the 451, it's a favorite of mine. This is my favorite patch in the world. I want to save it. How can you do it? You press Shift. And once you do Shift, I'm going to go right here and press and hold the step number 1. And now it's going to be registered to favorite. And if I do the same and I go to step, number 2, that is going to be registered to favorite 2. Now, the thing is, how can you, and if I'm going to go out to whatever other program, how can you access that favorite? Pretty simple. You do Shift and you tap on the step 1 in this case, and it's going to go to that favorite. If I go out again, maybe there, I'm on an initial patch. I'm going to do Shift and step number 2, and it's going to take you to your favorite. Okay, so this was super long, but notice all the things we learned, all the things we can do on the program edit, on the global edit, all the things we can do on the multi-engine with the oscillators, the envelopes, the filters, the effects, and we still need to cover more ground. We have the user waveforms, we have the sequencer, the motion sequence, so we can do a million things. The synthesizer, it's pretty complex, it's just pretty big. Right? It's a very good synthesizer, and that's why it's one of the best-selling synths in the world, right? That's how it is. That's how it is. So we still need to cover things. I'm going to be, of course, recording this on a separate video on the kind of, let's say, volume number 2. We're going to be talking about some other things like the librarian and some other things that you can do. But mostly we're going to be covering what we can do with the step sequencer and the motion sequence and how you can, create cool patches and cool sequences. So that's what we're going to be, that's what we are going to be doing on the next video. So if you liked this, you learned something and you found this useful, remember to like, remember to subscribe, of course, And if you have the money and you can afford it, go to Patreon and I will love a coffee. So if you can afford it, you can buy me a coffee. And in return, you're going to be getting some favorites, some cool things like patches for different devices. I'm building a KORG, for example, a Minilogue KORG, kind of presets for the patrons. All right, so see you on the next one.